with the attack on Pearl Harbor, the loyalty and the patriotism of Japanese Americans was called into question.
Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to sell their homes or leave their homes and businesses within a very short period of time, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and be relocated to a place where they were in camps, they were in prison, essentially.
Executive Order 9066 happened in February, stating that evacuation will occur. We had about a week's notice to pack up what you could carry and report to the assembly center. There was a list of things you could not take, radios and things you were not allowed to take. I left my favorite dolls, my favorite books, my piano was left. So in my suitcase, I had an autographed book from my friends and my clothes, and that was about it.
I was put into an internment camp only because I had Japanese blood. I had done nothing wrong. And we were assigned to a horse stall with another family, family of 3. Ours was a family of 5. And we filled a mattress cover with hay, and that was our mattress.
And all they did to the horse stalls was wash them out, whitewashed them, and the odor was still there.
My first night, I can still remember laying in my bed, trying to sleep, wondering what happened here. I'm an American citizen. What did I do wrong, you know?
Family was sent to Manzanar, and to get to Manzanar, you have to go across the California desert, and they were being shipped by train, and the shades were pulled down, and the speculation, the rampant speculation on the train, he said that everybody was afraid that what was going to happen to them was they were going to stop the train in the middle of the desert, they were going to be taken to the middle of the desert and shot, just like they were doing to the Jews in Germany.
So I think there were many Americans who would rise up in protest were the government to suggest something like that today, whereas almost no one rose up in protest against that during World War II.
I think the reason why there wasn't an uprising or anything when they said we were going to camp is because we were brought up not only in the American way, but we were brought up by parents who had come from Japan, and we were always taught that the authority was right, and you shouldn't do anything to disgrace your family. If your father said, don't rebel. And if you did, then you're a disgrace to your family name. And that was very important to us. We felt, is this the way we have to live in this one room? And you had to walk to the latrine. You had no privacy. If we said we didn't like being cooped up in this camp behind barbed wires, they would say to us, "Shikata ga nai." This is where the government put us. And so we have to make the best of it. None of us revolted. We were carrying on life as if we were on the outside.
There were basically 2 thoughts that were formed. One thought was, well, my constitutional rights were abridged. I'm here against my will. There was no due process, no trial, and why should I fight for this country? And the thought was, when my rights are restored, I will fight for this country. There was another group that felt, yes, my rights were abridged. Yes, I'm here against my will, but this is still my country, and I'm still an American. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm willing to serve.
When I first put on that uniform of a private of U.S. Army, it was a tremendous change that came over me. I felt whole again. They took away my civil rights. They put me in a concentration camp only because of racial prejudice.
Oh, good. Good.
I was so crammed with general technology work. Then I used to work 16-hour days, 6 days a week. Since I was 83 years old, that I can say that we're completely retired. So yeah, we're enjoying this life now. As long as I can keep my health, and this is, I think, is the key to enjoyment in retirement. Because my right elbow is short, my left pulls my club in. It doesn't keep it extended. See, there's quite a bit of difference. I should be up in here like this, you know, but if I extend my arm straight, this is how much difference. This is what I got hit with the shrapnel. And wherever you see this area that is replayed, this whole flesh, 2.5 inches of bone that was taken away with it. I ended up getting treatment for the next in the hospital.
World War II was the bloodiest and fiercest in the history of humankind. Over 100 million soldiers fought worldwide, with more than 50 million lives, including civilians, lost. In the European campaign was a unit that produced astonishing combat results. They were the 100th Battalion and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, composed mainly of Japanese Americans. This film is about the 100th Battalion and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, who were first seen as a problem, but later proved to be the problem solvers. This is the story of 442nd veterans who are now normal American civilians.
Growing up in the island and raising your family in the sugar plantation, your only job that you could get, whether you have a high school education or whether you have finished in the grade school, was labor job in the field of plantation. Growing up as a Japanese, yes, I have to say limited opportunities. At that time, I was working for 25 cents an hour, and I talked to the manager and I says, what is the chance of a raise? He said, no chance of raise. You gotta take it or leave it. I wasn't happy, so I left for another island. And there was a trade school in Honolulu that taught welding. I became a welder. I had a certificate after I graduated. So things have really moved up, you know. Now I was working over $3 an hour as a welder. Things were going so good until the war broke out.
The attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese military forever changed the lives of Japanese Americans. For them, the surprise attack on Hawaii was a tremendous shock. Their lives were changed overnight, from American citizens to the hateful enemy, the Japanese, who carried out the attack.
I was right in the area where I saw those bombing. Actually saw. It just happened that because I was a welder and we were building the underground fuel storage in Pearl Harbor, and we actually saw all the bombing, and I actually saw Battleship Arizona getting hit direct, and also Battleship Oklahoma was hit direct.
I was first sergeant of Company B of the ROTC regiment, and when that was converted into the Hawaii Territorial Guard, the whole organization and structure and rank and everything was converted into the Hawaii Territorial Guard. The service in the Hawaii Territorial Guard was quite short. You know, the Pentagon, they discovered to their horror that Hawaii, Honolulu was being guarded by hundreds of Japs in American uniform. And the 80% of the Hawaii Territorial Guard was discharged.
Yeah, I remember our company commander was a man named Nolly Smith. He was black, by the way. He was the one who had to tell us that we were being inactivated. I mean, they use that fancy word. Actually, we're fired, you know. But the unit was inactivated. So Captain Nolly Smith gathered us, and he had to tell us. And when he told us, you know, he shed tears. And of course, we also cried too. You know, we felt so bad.
Right after Pearl Harbor, my friends that I was going to school with, we got together and decided, let's go down and join the Navy. So we got in my car, 4 of us, went down to the naval base, and these kids were accepted into the Navy, and I was not. So I was really upset because I wanted to go in. And I said, why not? I'm an American. Why can't I go? And they said, well, you're classified as a 4C. And all this time I had been a 1A. So 4C meant I was now an enemy alien. So I was not eligible to join any branch of the U.S. military. So when my schoolmates heard that, they said, well, if the Navy can't take you, we're not going to go either. And we all left and went back to school.
Nisei, who were in the Hawaii Territorial Guard and were discharged, they went back to university. We were met by this man, Hung Wai Ching, who was the director of the University YMCA at that time, so he knew many of us. One of the things he said was, well, if they don't trust you with a gun, maybe they'll trust you with pick and shovels. So why don't you guys offer yourselves your labor and volunteer as a labor battalion?
The popular name was Varsity Victory Volunteers, or Triple V or VVV. And there were 169 of us who served doing labor work, building barracks, fixing roads, digging rocks.
In Hawaii, while the students in the VVV contributed their labor to the national war effort, U.S. military officials were baffled about what to do with the Japanese American soldiers serving in the military prior to the war. Discharging all could equal approximately half of Hawaii's military force and lead to chaos. However, they could not include them with the general military unit. After much deliberation, in May 1942, General George C. Marshall decided to form an all-Japanese-American unit. This unit of approximately 1,400 soldiers was formed and shipped out of Hawaii to the mainland in June of 1942. They were named the 100th Battalion. They later became part of the most decorated unit in U.S. Army history. In Hawaii, the devotion of the VVV won the confidence of the Army. On the mainland, the 100th Battalion was already gaining trust because of their outstanding training records.
When World War II began, of course, Japanese Americans were classified as enemy aliens at the beginning. But there was an effort, particularly on the part of our then Executive Secretary Mike Masaoka, who worked with the Department of Army to form a all Japanese American unit. So after a lot of persuasion, a lot of discussion, the unit was created for Japanese Americans.
I was working for the defense plant in Pearl Harbor. I didn't think that there was enough contribution. At that age, when we were young, maybe we were looking for adventure. I really can't say what motivated me, but I knew that I wanted to do my part, and that was the main reason for volunteering. I had no thoughts of what might happen to me.
Oh, no, that's all right. I had plenty of experience what to do, so, oh, oh, thank you. That's a compliment. Oh, thank you. Bye now, sweetheart. Old days, I thought we would continue to be discriminated, but now I have all the rights returned. I am great to be an American, and it's a wonderful place to live. The four Akagi brothers pooled their money and purchased a farm where the homes are right now in the background. And who knew at the time I was in the service that it could ever happen. This was a 70-acre piece, and a railroad track bisected the farm into two sections, 40 acres below the track and another 30 acres above the track. In order to make the plan complete, we had to name the streets and donate the street to the city. So that's why we ended up with Akagi Lane, Nashi Lane, Hana Court. Everything is Japanese connected on this development, except over here you can read Lindsay Grove Court, and that came from the town that we lived in, California. Dad bought the oldest son a 40-acre piece on the hillside before the war, and then lost it due to the evacuation.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry. We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move. Neither the Army nor the War Relocation Authority relished the idea of taking men, women, and children from their homes, their shops, and their farms. So the military and civilian agencies alike determined to do the job as a democracy should, with real consideration for the people involved.
The day before we were to leave, my brother and I distributed the field boxes out in a tomato patch to pick the next day. And that afternoon, after my brother and I distributed the boxes to pick the tomatoes, the War Relocation Authority, they were in charge of the evacuation. They came over and said, all right, you move out tomorrow morning. And 8 o'clock in the morning, War Relocation Authority sent an Army bus out to load our family into the bus with 2 soldiers with sub-Thompson machine gun guarding us, and we had only 1 suitcase apiece.
first time I've heard his story. Oh, I can feel what he's feeling. I can feel the pain.
The worst thing that happened was when my girlfriend, her father said to her mother and her family, you go ahead, because I want to just make sure that the house is all locked up now. They said, all right. So they went down, and he never came to the train station. He never showed up. And they got so worried, so they went to the police and said he was supposed to come, and he didn't show up. So the police went back to the house, and they found him, and he was dead in the house. He just couldn't fathom life in a concentration camp. And that was one of the saddest, hardest things for us to hear, that her father was, had committed suicide.
Japanese Americans in the mainland were forced into internment camps. Their constitutional rights as U.S. citizens were violated. The first round of volunteers in the mainland fell far below the Army's expectations at merely 1,000.
I didn't join to say, oh, I'm joining to prove my loyalty, or I didn't say I'm going to join so that my family could have a better life maybe. Those thoughts never came to me. Before I left home, my dad told me, "Shikkari shinasai." Yeah. So he did not object at all. Yeah, I said, wow, did that come out of my dad's mouth? I thought he was going to say, oh, you dumb fool. He just wanted me to do my best.
The other issue that was very interesting, which is very crucial to the formation of the Japanese American soldier, was that Japanese American Nisei from Hawaii and Japanese American from the mainland were very different culturally. So when these two groups got together, it was like oil and water. They did not get along. And they would fight. One misunderstood the other. And the fights were so terrible. And then Colonel Pence and the chaplain, Hiro Higuchi, said, I've got an idea. If these guys aren't getting along, let's send all the Hawaiian troublemakers who are getting into all these fights to the concentration camp in Rohr, Arkansas. And all the Hawaiians were having a good time. He said, we're going to go to meet all these wahine. And a wahine is a girl. And then these Niseis drove up to the camp, and what did they see? Barbed wire. 12 feet high, surrounded by guard towers with live machine guns that was pointed in the camp. And then they were quiet, and their faces changed. And they looked around, and on the way back, not one person said a word. And the fighting stopped, and this became a fighting unit that were fighting. Even the Hawaiians knew that it was a fight against prejudice.
While the 442nd Regimental Combat Team was in training, the 100th Battalion landed in Italy in September of 1943. A few days later, during their first battle, Hawaii's baseball star, Sergeant Joe Takata, became the first Japanese American killed in combat, and the first to receive the Distinguished Service Cross for the 100th Battalion.
The Nippo-American soldier fought in the north part of the casino town, and crossing the Rapido River, and fought in the hill just close to the monastery. Is very hard fighting against the German paratroopers. But in the winter of the 1944, is empty river, is very fast river, is not easy to crossing. And after crossing the river and attack this part of the German defense, in the barracks, so a part of the Nippo-American soldier attack the town of Cassino, just closed the castle hill. We can view from here the castle.
At the top of the mountain, where the monastery stood, the German military had a dominating position, and the Allied forces continued to suffer casualties and damages. The Allied forces planned to break through by destroying the monastery with aerial bombings. A monastery with over 1,000 years of history was completely destroyed. The 100th Battalion never retreated in combat, and their casualty rate was tremendously high. However, U.S. military officials quickly learned of their bravery and excellence. Due to the numerous decorations awarded to the countless dead and wounded, the 100th Battalion was nicknamed the Purple Heart Battalion. In the Battle of Monte Cassino, approximately 55,000 Allied forces were killed in action. Also, the 100th Battalion lost half of its men and was removed from the Battle of Monte Cassino. The 100th Battalion left by sea and landed in Anzio in order to receive replacements and to open the path to Rome. Afterwards, the 100th Battalion, now reduced to approximately 1,000 soldiers, liberated the road to Rome. However, they were stopped from entering the city. Jeeps and tanks, filled with Caucasian soldiers, passed them by.
これは悲しかっただろうと思う。ローマ、100大隊がローマに入っていった。一番先行ったのは100大隊だから。もうローマが見るとこ行った。そこで100大隊がストップから戦車隊が後ろからやってきた。戦車隊が後ろから来たんですよ。後ろから来て100大隊の後でここで止まってるわけで、戦車隊が行った。そして結局は100大隊はローマに入れなかったんですよ。で戦車隊白人の部隊がローマに入った。でその日系兵たちは夜密かにローマを迂回してローマの先こう行く。それは忘れられないね。あの人涙流して話していた。まあそのいわゆる日本人日系部隊のシチュエーションがそれでわかるね。
They passed the age-old Colosseum, while the people of the capital of Italy cheered the troops of America, Britain, Canada, and other allied nations with whom fascist Italy was recently at war. General Clark, commander of the conquering Fifth, is mobbed by the enthusiastic Romans. Take it easy, says the general.
In June 1944, news of the liberation of the ancient city of Rome by Allied forces suddenly brought national attention to the Italian front in the U.S. 2 days later, the Allied forces invaded Normandy in northern France, the largest amphibious operation in history. After landing, the Italian campaign never garnered similar national interest. While the soldiers of the 100th Battalion continued their fight in the violent European campaign, the U.S. military's top-secret weapon, the Military Intelligence Service, MIS, were also making remarkable contributions to the war in the Pacific. Shooting down the plane of Japan's best naval admiral, Isoroku Yamamoto, was possible only with intelligence acquired by the MIS. Also, the interrogation of captured Japanese soldiers, translations of diaries, and monitoring of telegraphs were crucial contributions made by the MIS that is said to have shortened the Pacific War by 2 years.
As the threat of war began to engulf the world, and many men were swept up into the draft and started to train at camps all across the country. Some U.S. Army intelligence operatives began to question Nisei draftees in the various camps on the West Coast. Colonel John Weckerling and Kai Rasmussen were the linguist specialists, and they had the wisdom to recruit John Aizo. He stepped forward and did a tremendous job in organizing and ramrodding the teaching of the language. The Kibe had top-notch language skills, and because they had lived in Japan. And so they often became instructors or had more than responsible jobs at headquarters or in combat.
And were teased and ostracized by their classmates. They called them Bobura because they were just Japanese in the way they talked and acted. They were branded as Japs and mistrusted. Even the MIS guys will tell you that while it was purported to be their guard, a Caucasian soldier guarding and being their bodyguard, if they were that, they were also doubling as spies to make sure that they don't do anything wrong. Even as an MISer, they were not fully trusted. It was the Kibe who saved their butts.
They helped to save perhaps 1 million lives, not only American lives, but Japanese lives and civilian lives.
For example, in places like Iwo Jima and Saipan, where people were holed up in caves, they were able to shout to them in Japanese as American soldiers and urge them not to kill themselves or not to do something that's suicidal.
While many Japanese Americans proved their loyalty to the U.S. by volunteering into the 442nd Regimental Combat Team to fight for their country, some Japanese Americans challenged the draft due to their internment and loss of constitutional rights.
Well, actually, I was in no danger of being inducted because I had a family already, 2 children, and they weren't inducting fathers with children at that time. I really didn't have to be active or anything, but I strongly felt that this was a real injustice and so bakanishiteru, no end to it. So I said we better start protesting. We were holding mass meetings at different blocks, explaining the various violations of our civil rights that the government had perpetrated.
In February 1943. Branded as enemy aliens, Japanese Americans were forced into internment camps and yet asked to swear their loyalty to the U.S. by the loyalty questionnaire. This caused great conflict within the Japanese American community. Those who answered no to the loyalty questions were considered disloyal and sent to the segregated Tule Lake internment camp.
Oh, Tule Lake, the bad guy. You know, and just right off the bat, they just name you as a bad guy, regardless. And even people that was never in camp, oh, Tule Lake, they're bad guys. They're a bunch of bad guys. When you see a draft register, they're more so. You know.
Some looked upon them as cowards. They're not cowards. It took a lot of strength, a lot of courage to do what they did, to go through prison sentence. No, that's not easy. Physical courage is easy. It's moral and spiritual courage that's difficult. We did what we thought was right with courage. They did what they thought was right with courage. And that's the American way.
At Camp Shelby in Mississippi, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team ended their training and left the U.S. for Italy, where they were joined by the 100th Battalion in Civitavecchia. Although the 100th Battalion was the first battalion of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, their exceptional combat records allowed the unit to retain their name as the 100th Battalion within the 442nd Regiment. Shortly after, the 100th Battalion showed their experience and importance to the newly arrived 442nd Regimental Combat Team. The 100th Battalion's exceptional achievements on the battlefield in the liberation of Belvedere led to their first Presidential Unit Citation. It would be the first of 7 Presidential Unit Citations awarded to the Japanese Americans of the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
And we had severe casualties on the very first day. We lost a number of men killed, number wounded. Finally, we were able to move away from the front to the back of the hill, and then we were able to fire back. But we really didn't know what was happening. I can still remember seeing the dust flying from the machine gun hitting the ground. We didn't even know what that was. It was the bullets hitting the ground causing the dust to fly, but we didn't realize it because it was the first day.
The 2 units went in. They didn't know what they were doing now. I mean, we didn't. So the 100th was called in. They came in and they just chopped up the Germans. And it was a sight to behold. And then 442nd men say, wow, those guys, they really know how to do it.
Yes, I was afraid. Everyone was afraid, I would think. And I've seen men under heavy fire find themselves with wet pants. They can't control it. Well, it's part of human nature. But the thing that horrified me when I killed my first German, and instead of experiencing remorse, realizing I took a human life, the men all praised me. Terrific, Dad, terrific. And I was proud because early on in my training, since I was one of the best shots in the company, they made me the sniper. I had a scope, which was a symbol of, something special. And here I am, a good Christian boy who's sang in the choir and taught Sunday school, and I'm the #1 killer.
Watch this soldier. A sniper gets him.
I became a driver to pick up dead bodies. My main job. At first, it's kind of hard, but after a while, somebody get used to it. A dead body on a stretcher. One time, I knew the guy, and that was hard. Tommy. He was a sergeant, machine gun section leader. Not my section, but the next section. And we trained for 1 year. So I sat next to him, I guess the whole night. I don't remember sleeping. I sat on my helmet. That's what we all had helmets. That was a great support. I sat on it, and I saw Tommy lying in front of me in his uniform, and very much at peace, asleep. And he was so clean. I mean, his uniform, there's no blood or anything. It's I guess I was really sad with the loss. He was a good guy. I mean, decent, good guy.
In September 1944, the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team was ordered to go from Italy to the French battlefront. In October 1944, the French town of Brières, long occupied by the Germans, was finally liberated by the 100th 442nd, but at a tremendous cost. To celebrate the 65th anniversary of the liberation, veterans of the 100th 442nd revisited their former battlegrounds.
Yeah, it's a special feeling that I have passing through this town. Well, it was at the outskirts of this town that we passed through 65 years ago, and I'm especially, happy that I can mingle with these people today, and they're honoring us, and I'm especially more honored that they included us in this celebration.
French townspeople continue today to show deep gratitude towards their Japanese American liberators.
We want to thank them because it's very important for us. We know that it was a very big battle with lots of wounded and murder and killed persons. So people here know that it depends of that for our liberation, and that it was not easy for them. It's more than heroes. I think all American soldiers who went in France were heroes because they are young, they are fighting in a land they didn't know, and a lot of them died. They are all heroes. But those from the 442 are more than that, because more than that, they are fighting against discrimination. And they are fighting to show others they are good guys. So it's very emotional.
In Brières, a road named Rue du 442 commemorates their liberation by the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
This is the 442 Regiment American, the infantry. Liberator de Brières, October 1944.
Right, October 44, yeah.
So they came right through this area.
Yeah, we went through this area, yeah.
And this experience has just been so great and enjoyable, and I've learned so many things from all the stories I've heard, and I'm just so excited to hear them and pass them on.
The weather was just so miserable, and rain and mud and
cold.
Nah, I never experienced such bad weather as I did in the Vosges mountains there.
We did kill a lot of Germans, soldiers, and they had to be hauled out of the forest. But even if they laid there for a day or two or even 3 days, they were preserved because of the cold. And when they went past me about 5 feet away, there was no smell at all. And comparing with Italy, where in the hot summer heat, anybody that's killed and not picked up readily, at the end of the day, they're all bloated and you can smell them from a quarter of a mile.
And then we hear this weird screaming sound coming. Boom. That was incoming. I picked myself up over there about 10 feet. I'm all black and blue, just like this. I get black and blue when somebody grabs me on the arm. This is how I get. Concussion. Explosion, I was all black and blue. Ached all over, but I just had the scratch. But my friend from Yohei Sagami was on the ground. I turned him over. He got cut jugular vein here. And the blood was just... Every time his pulse would beat, a stream of blood would come out. He hit one of his main arteries, and then the blood was just... He lost too much blood and he died. He was the first Nisei to be killed in France.
The first group of survivors of the 442nd came to my village in 1971. 17 members of the K Company. I was named to guide their guy, and they were really, really emotional. To have only 17 survivors in their company, losing all their friends in a couple of yards over there. They just get together and begin to cry. Sergeant Ben Hinakatsu, Hawaii, 442nd Infantry, World War II. He died the day of the liberation of my village on October 19. There's a lot of his grave over there. Just died in my village.
After the liberation of Brières, the soldiers of the 100th 442nd were in a state of great exhaustion. Then, they were ordered to rescue the Texas Battalion, surrounded by the Germans in the Vosges Mountains. Later, this rescue mission would be designated as one of the 10 major battles in U.S. Army history.
We just came back from a 4-day engagement against the enemy. So the first thing when we get together is, come on, get it there, let's play a game, you know. Then the sergeant came and said, bad news, we're gonna hit the front tomorrow. We started, everybody started, gee, they don't give us a rest. We like to stay in the back and go drink beer.
We knew we were being used because we were expendable. And we welcomed this because we felt that here was the opportunity we wanted to demonstrate what we're worth.
The Texas Battalion was surrounded by the German military. Several rescue attempts by the Texas Regiment were suppressed by the German forces.
And I remember it was just my birthday. I was 21 years old. And I was real happy, you know. It was a terrible condition. It was raining, it was cold, it was muddy. The Germans were shelling us, and we're trying to attack a hill. The machine guns were shooting at us, and all of a sudden the German popped up and shot me. But somehow, he was only like from me to you, just 6-7 feet away. And he just point blank missed. And I turned around and I shot him, and I ran up and I grabbed him by the neck. He was just a kid, maybe a 14 or 15-year-old kid. He's probably more scared than I was, you know, and he shot at me and missed me. I should have been dead. But, you know, just things like that. And you see your friends get shot, and bodies flying and just flying. And you just can't forget those things. And, you know, somebody next to you, right away, he's gone. You just keep going. You can't stop. You have to keep going. October 27, 1944, I became 21. I just remember that day so well, and I should have been dead.
I was one of those that walked into the forest and boom, I tripped the booby trap. And it was wet and cold, so the charge must have gotten wet, because even if it exploded, the blast went away from me. Mind is complete blank to what I did afterward. Did I run somewhere or go hide, or what did I do?
And one of the problems in that region is that heavy forest with thick trees that when they do shell, always the shell will burst on the top of the tree and the shrapnel will just come down like an umbrella. So there was no way you can avoid, getting injured.
In one case where he was about 10 feet away, and I happened to be talking to him, and all of a sudden a shell came, zoom, a shrapnel, cut the top of his head off.
Just bang, 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 just continuously. And the tree bursts were coming, and everybody was trying to stay hidden behind a tree or a rock. But, you know, the shells keep bursting, coming down. That's when I got the shrapnel, big piece of shrapnel in my back. Right behind here it came in, but it came in at an angle, so it came around like this, slid right around. A big piece of red-hot shrapnel. Oh, the pain is unbearable. Not only from piercing your body, but the hot metal that's inside of you, and it's just burning, and it hurts so much you can't move. You just kind of curl up and you can't move your body. It's in shock. You can't do anything.
Well, I got hit when I was in the foxhole, covering myself up, and I got hit in the back there with a piece of shrapnel. The shrapnel was too close to my spine, so they didn't take it out. I believe it's still embedded in my back.
In the morning, as we were moving out, the Germans know exactly where we were, and they were shelling us like crazy. We had all kinds of shell coming, and one of the shell landed on top of that heavy tree that we were under. And of all the people that was there, I was the only one that got hit.
Here you can see the mountain. It's a G mountain, and it is this one, called in French La Vison. And so you see this tree the same, took in October 1944.
Banzai Hill.
Yes, Banzai Hill, you're right. The Banzai charge was done in this mountain.
So we're trying to move our men up higher because the machine guns were firing down at us. We couldn't get going because there's too much fire. So finally he said, we'll make a banzai charge. So we got the whole hill. Everybody made a banzai charge up there to get close enough where they could throw a hand grenade at the machine gun. When you stop the machine gun from shooting, you can get up there close enough to shoot at it. That's what we had to do. But we were being pinned down all across because they had the high spot, and you're coming up, like right here, you're coming up, and they've got you. You can't get away from them. So we made the banzai charge up the hill, and really something. You know, it was pretty bad. Bodies were flying all over. You know, guys were getting hit left and right.
I'm down in a hole, so I didn't see the German come around, and they started climbing the hill. They were taking the hill back, you know. Oh my God, I says, Germans behind there climbing the hill again, so watch out for the Germans. And Saburo Taramachi stands up and says, where? Machine gun shot him. So I crawled over to his hole and picked him up. Why'd you stand up, you know? And he tried to say something, but he went. Then I know he died. He died, looking out of the blood. I said, oh God, then I lost it. I was mad, cried. You son of a bitch. Took my tongue, zigzagged up the zigzag test. What this way? Then there's the rest of them. Come on. So they said I shot 12 guys, but I don't remember how I shot. Then the other soldiers started waving handkerchiefs, giving up. But I had to watch, see that maybe the guy in back of him might have a gun. So they all just waving their hands like this. I said, okay. So they said I took 34 prisoners, but I don't know how many I took.
I get cut down by the German machine gun head on. I have to go because I get a BL. You don't care a pistol or samurai sword and go in the front. BL man. Because BL man is not easy to get because they don't want to have to attack. I was lucky to survive from the Germans. They got me down though, but I survived.
The Japanese American soldiers of the 100th 442nd proved their loyalty to their country with their own blood.
So I coming down the slope, I look in. I thought I saw an American guy come out from behind a tree, looked toward me, he ran back. So I said, hey, I think they're the last battalion. And sure enough, we came out of the last battalion. So I took up my cigarette. I said, oh, you guys want cigarette? I got on me my musket, you know. I had about 3 packs. Boom, it's all gone.
In order to rescue 211 Texas Battalion soldiers, the 100th 442nd, suffered far more casualties, killed and wounded. General Dahlquist, who commanded this battle, was criticized. Some even called him the foolish general. However, this irrational plan was a turning point for Japanese Americans. The news of their achievement and sacrifice received national attention in the U.S.
They were the best. The 442 was the best because they had the ability to get the people out where other people couldn't. They did a terrific job in Italy also.
You know, he never forgot that he came home because of them.
And he thought they were the only ones that could have done it as
Right.
well. Many tried and were not able to be successful, but the men of the 442, through strength and courage, were able to break through and rescue my grandfather.
There'd already been two armies that had tried to break through other armies, and then finally the 442 was sent up.
Of course, we view them as heroes and have always thought of them as heroes, but they took a great deal of effort to make sure we understood that they thought our dad was a hero too, for holding on and not giving up and waiting. And we'd never thought of that before, and it was another lovely gift from them.
The officer in the center is our father. He was the operations officer at the battalion, coordinating the rescue, working with the 442nd to get relief supplies once the breakthrough was accomplished.
I mean, I have to give them a lot of credit for being here. I mean, these guys aren't spring chickens anymore, and for them to come all the way over and to go through the woods again, it's amazing. But, you know, somebody's going to have to carry the torch for the next generation to keep it alive.
You slipped in something like that?
No, he had just a hole with trees over it and foliage. Any way you walk,
The 100th 442nd received 5 presidential unit citations within a month and a half in the battlefronts of France. You can imagine the severity of their continuous battles.
The general of the 36th Division called our colonel and said, I want you to assemble your troops so that I can personally extend to them the gratitude of the division. And so when we got together, General said, what did you do, send them out on leave and pass? No, they're either dead or in a hospital. The general got so shook up he couldn't say a word. He couldn't give a speech. That's how it ended.
For example, I Company had only 8 out of 193 men left standing, after the rest were either seriously wounded or killed in combat.
And it's uniquely special to see the way the French have never forgotten this event. And you know, when I think about it, I think very simply, they look at the 5,000 graves in Epinal Cemetery, and they realize that all those people died for them.
You know, one of the areas that really touched me was the cemetery, and I did not realize how beautifully the U.S. have kept the graves where all the GIs have passed away. So I think that was one of the areas, more than the areas that I went through fighting that kind of touched me.
This weather was like this a lot?
Yeah.
Back in 44?
Yeah, oh yeah.
A lot of overcast?
Well, even overcast, and then you get into the woods. It's almost...
Well, you know, we're nearing the end of our lives too, and they gave up their lives for a long time. We've lived for so long, you know, in peace after 1944 and 1945. And I think it's just showing a little respect for those who give up their life.
The 522nd Field Artillery Battalion of the 100th 442nd was recognized for their speed and accuracy. Needing more firepower, the 522nd Battalion was separated from the 100th 442nd to march with the 7th Infantry Division towards Germany. Ironically, half of the soldiers in the 522nd, who also came from U.S. internment camps, would become one of the liberators of the Nazi concentration camp.
It looked Orientals. I didn't know their Nisei then, and I didn't know their Japanese. But after the war, I knew they were Nisei. Japanese? Yeah, they're called Nisei.
We were not told about them. We were not informed. Actually, we were surprised to see them. Many were very thin, emaciated, and could hardly walk. Well, the one that I knew most was called Larry Lubezki. He was a Lithuanian Jew. He was in Dachau. He had a tattoo on his arm with an ID number. And he was a little bit younger than us, but he spoke very good English, German, French, several other languages. So we hired him as an interpreter for us so we could negotiate with the farmers and natives in the area.
After we had parted, and whenever I had the spare moment, the memory of Larry had always come into my mind. And so I went over to Washington, D.C. on the day the Jewish Holocaust Monument was supposed to open, but it was closed. That was about 49 years after we had met in Europe. And so I went back the second time when I found out the Holocaust was actually open, so I presented the man at the door. I have a picture of Larry Lubezki. His PW number is 83123, and showed him the picture and the number and everything. And he said, "Oh, come on in, come on in." And about 6 months later, they located Larry, so they gave him my telephone number. And lo and behold, Larry called me one Sunday, and I don't know if we cried more than we talked, but it was quite a conversation.
When I talked to the Jewish survivors of what they felt when they saw those Niseis, they said the face of a Japanese American was the face of an angel who had come down from heaven. Japanese Americans always wanted to know who those Jews were, and the Jews always wanted to know who those Japanese were. So we finally got our answer. What day did we get our answer? May 2nd, 1993, on the very day they liberated the Dachau Death March in the Jerusalem Ramada Renaissance, where we met them, and everybody cried on that day. Everybody cried on that day. We found out that the Jews were Lithuanians, and they'd been in the Dachau camp number 7, which was a sub-camp of Dachau, and they'd been there for almost a year, and they were dying at a rate of dozens of people a week, and they never thought they were going to make it through the war. And the Japanese Americans saved that last group of several hundred.
The recognition of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team is something that is celebrated and praised altogether in the Museum of Tolerance as a very important part. The troops chanced upon these camps. It was purely fortuitous. But they recognized when they did the significance of what they had found. And we are very much indebted to those brave soldiers who not only continued to stay, to assist, to liberate, but bore important testimony and gave eyewitness accounts that ultimately stand as the record of history for what they discovered. So this is a very real chapter in the history of the Holocaust. It is a very important chapter for those people who were actually discovered and who owe their lives to the fact that those who found them cared to resuscitate them, to assist them, to restore them to life.
The irony of people who had volunteered from concentration camps in America, they weren't death camps, but they were certainly terrible, or liberating camps, is certainly the greatest irony of the 442nd. And the other irony that they were told not to talk about it, and they didn't talk about it, so we didn't know until recently.
It is speculated that the Holocaust of Nazi Germany was responsible for the deaths of approximately 6 million Jews and 11 million lives total. A testimony to the tragedy of humans dehumanized by war. The 100th 442nd finished a fierce battle in northeastern France near the German border and was transferred to southern France. Replacements finally arrived and the regiment was restructured, a relatively easy stay for the soldiers. Due to the insistence of General Mark Clark, the 100th 442nd, excluding the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion, was sent on a secret mission to take the Gothic Line, the last major German line of defense in the Italian campaign. Although the loyalty of the 100th 442nd was questioned at first when they were seen as a problem, they soon proved themselves to be problem solvers, one of the best combat units that the Army counted on as their last resort.
There were 6 mountains across there called the Gothic Line, and each one was cross-sighted so that they could shoot across every mountain. No matter where you tried to go up, they could shoot at you.
Allora, le montagne che vediamo in fondo sono le montagne della linea gotica. Praticamente la linea difensiva tedesca partiva in quella direzione dal mare, dal fiume Cinquale, la località Cinquale dove c'è il fiume Versilia. Nella sponda meridionale c'erano attestati gli americani, sulla sponda settentrionale i tedeschi. Poi la linea continuava lungo quelle colline fino al monte Folgorito, che è quel monte fatto a piramide. Dietro si vede una piccola punta che è il monte Carchio. Erano 2 capisaldi essenziali per la difesa tedesca.
Dark of night, pitch dark. They climbed up to the hill and it's about 4,000 feet that they climbed that night, and it's about this steep. And it goes like this at the end, and they had to hold on to each other. They got near the top, they still couldn't see. They got near what they thought was the top, and they stayed right there until all the men came up. And at daybreak, they made the charge. They were right below a machine gun nest. 2 German machine gunners were sound asleep. They didn't hear a thing. Of course, they started shooting, went up on top, and they started clearing the hill.
They didn't do it in 6 months like the 2 divisions. They didn't do it in a week. They didn't do it in a day, but they did it in 32 minutes. In 32 minutes, they did, with 2,500 men, what basically 20,000 men couldn't do in 6 months. They basically neutralized the position, and the war in Italy was essentially over.
When my elbow was struck and I knew it was gone, the first thing that came to mind was the grenade in my right hand. So instead of screaming and yelling, which none of us did, I just pulled it out, and lucky it hit the enemy. But my job was to make certain that the attack continued, so I continued while the blood was gushing out with the machine gun. I had no pain. After a certain while, you don't feel pain.
Allora, questo monumento è dedicato al soldato alleato caduto sulla linea gotica, in quanto in questa zona hanno combattuto dal settembre 44 all'aprile del 45 soldati degli eserciti statunitensi, inglesi e brasiliani, e hanno combattuto soprattutto che quella linea di fortificazioni tedesca nota come linea gotica. Questo soldato rappresenta Sadao Munemori.
Sadao Munemori, the first Japanese-American soldier to receive the Medal of Honor, lost his life at the Gothic Line when an enemy grenade landed in front of his comrades. Munemori threw himself on top of the grenade to save his comrades and sacrificed his own life. Achievements of the Japanese-American soldiers are highly recognized in France and Italy.
You know, I think good soldiers have direction. They follow rules and regulations. They certainly understand standards. But what distinguishes great soldiers from good soldiers is motivation. And the soldiers of the 442nd were extremely motivated and committed to doing well and showing that Japanese American soldiers were loyal to this great country of ours.
Gimu, Meiyo,
Gaman, shikata ga nai.
Haji, Shimbo, Doryoku, those ideas that their Issei parents imparted to their children played a big part in how they fought. And I think that sense of family tie and the sense of honor and dignity that was a part of the values that their parents imparted to them played a great role.
When I was going to Compton Japanese School, this is just before the war started, so it must have been 1941, and the principal would stand on the dais. Well, this day he got up and he said he received a letter from the Prime Minister of Japan, who was Hideki Chojo. And he said, this is a letter to the Nisei. He said, you are an American. So as an American, you must be loyal to your country. And I was shocked. I thought he was Japanese, I was Japanese descent. He would say just the opposite, try to entice us to fight for Japan, not fight for America. And, you know, I felt I was American, but I was surprised that he would say something like that. And I tried to reason why he would say something like that. And I realized that he was a soldier. And what he was doing was he was going by the Bushido precepts, the samurai precepts. You have to always be loyal to your Lord and to your country. For him, for us to be loyal to America is a natural thing for a person to do.
Mr. Fujitani states the same thing, how he has heard about it with many other attendants in Hawaii at a speech by Yosuke Matsuoka, Japanese ambassador of the League of Nations upon his arrival.
In his speech in Hawaii, he emphasized that the Nisei were Americans, and that in order to be exemplary Americans, they should be loyal to America. This sentiment was echoed repeatedly by our religious leaders, Japanese school teachers, and our parents. A good Nisei, therefore, was first a good loyal American.
Morning of our first battle, we're all assembled, ready to move. I sat down with the squad. I was a sergeant then, and I asked all of them, I said, what were you thinking about last night, the night before the attack? Everyone gave me the same answer in different ways. I hope I do not dishonor the family. I hope I don't bring shame. I hope my family is not ashamed of me. Same thing. Honor was very important. To bring shame to the family was unbearable. And so all of us went into battle fearful. That's human nature. But that's the way it was.
You know, in a crisis, when you're faced with very difficult problems, I would say that these Japanese values came out and I think helped the Nisei to face these very difficult problems that they face. Like, for instance, Kuni no Tame, that means for the sake of the country, but what only country we knew was America.
I remember once when we found his Purple Hearts in the house, we showed them to him and said, oh, what are these? And he said, oh, well, you know, it's from the war. And we said, well, you know, talk to us about the war. And he said, no, it's just killing people. So he didn't talk, wouldn't talk.
You know, when we were young, we'd go swimming or to the beach and we would see his scars, but he didn't like talking about it.
Most veterans do not speak of their war experiences to their family members. While there are many reasons, many veterans still carry deep emotional scars from the war, even today.
You know, I had post-traumatic stress disorder when the war was over. I had to leave the Army. I was supposed to go to training and go to school. I didn't want any of the Army. I just told them, get me out as soon as you can. And this is 1945 when the war was over. We had a lot of problems of, for instance, nightmares. You know, you have all kinds of strange things in your mind when you're sleeping. And none of them are wild anymore. You know, you don't wake up screaming anymore, but it's still there.
I remember the first time I saw him out in the yard after we were married, and an airplane went over the house. He just froze. I think he kind of remembered the airplanes over in Germany or France.
But any sharp noise would kind of shake me up a little bit because of the constant tree bursts that we experience here, you know, in Auger Mountain.
Generally, the VA says it's about 30% have the full-blown syndromes. They say that actually probably 98% of the people are significantly affected. Usually it takes a unit maybe about 10 days or 2 weeks to get combat-wise, to get their bearings and to understand where are the dangers, where's the safe spots, how they can operate. And then they reach their peak of efficiency. And after 1 month, that they start to be affected. And the more months they go, the more affected they are, the more angry they get, the more frustrated they become, and their efficiency declines. Most of our units are out for a year, and so that's a very long time to be in a combat zone.
I struggled with the nightmares for 20 years and it starts slackening off a little after 20 years until it turned into just dreams.
No, he never told us about that. But I always wondered if he did, because we would watch movies where, you know, a war movie, and then somebody would have nightmares. I'm like, I wonder if my dad does. But he was such a quiet person that I didn't want, I don't know, I felt it was like kind of invading his, you know, personal privacy and his, so I never asked.
Like my children, I don't think they're interested in what I went through, number one. So I'm not going to force myself on them. Like, hey, I want to tell you about my wartime. No.
It's a lost legacy otherwise for us.
But at the same time, they don't understand what we went through. No one could understand unless you actually went through combat and had the killing experiences. You just can't understand.
If you run over a cat, you will always remember that bump. You can never forget that. Now, if you can't forget killing a cat, how can you forget killing a human being?
Well, 私は昔のことこんなひどい経験したのは話したくなかったの。
I killed a lot of people. I won't tell you how many. That's my secret.
Sometimes bodies are ripped apart and it just turned inside out. It's a mess.
I'll never forget one of the first Las Vegas reunions I went to, and Joe Sakato, who's one of the Medal of Honor recipients, was there, and he teared up because my dad introduced him and asked him to say a few words. So he got up and he talked, and he said, and he tears up and he says, "I'm no hero. I had to kill people, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't good." And he still carries that with him.
Then I saw the German that did that, so I shot him in the leg here. Then he saw me, so he picks up his gun again. When he picked up his gun, he made a mistake. So I shot him again, and I shot him down here. And he went back. Then he was crying for somebody to come and help him. So we said, well, we know where the Germans are, so we had to go back up. So when I got top to this German was crying and screaming for help, but nobody came. Pretty soon I hear, boom. No more screaming, no more crying. Couldn't understand what was wrong, what's going on. He committed suicide. He put a grenade. Later on, went on to see that hill. He put a grenade under his head and he blew his head off. He committed suicide. He was in so much pain that no Germans, his counterpart, came to help him. If they came and helped him, he probably would have gone home. But he was crying in pain and nobody helped him, and so he'll never go home. Young, blonde-headed kid. That hurt me here. Why can't they help him? You know, why can't they help him? Then when he blows his head off, that's why I wear this medal for him too. I wear this medal for those that didn't come home. I'm not a hero. I got the hero for being a hero, but I wear only for those that never came back. Oh, Hisagami was the first one in Saburo Tano, George Futamata from Puebla, Colorado. Ben Mazoka from Friday, all these and Tadamachi, and all these guys that died, you know.
On August 14th, 1945, the war ended with the victory by the Allied forces. On July 15th, 1946, presidential aides in Washington, D.C. recommended the cancellation of the award ceremony for the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team due to the rain. However, President Truman refused and stated, "The rain is nothing compared to what the boys had to endure in combat." The 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team was the only unit in U.S. history to be greeted by the President.
You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you won.
And when they talk about the war and their sacrifices, you understand just what they gave for us to have today. So I take it for granted that I have my meals and my bed and my remote control, not to be lazy, and my wireless phone. But I have it all because I owe it to these people that are buried here, to those back home. Don't forget that when we talk about the sacrifice of the soldiers that are here, we've got to remember the sacrifice of the families back home, because they gave up a lot too, especially, giving up their loved ones.
For their size and length of service, the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team of World War II remains today as the most highly decorated unit in U.S. military history.
They returned as heroes, and it was the kind of marketable action that they took. The resistors' action, although I consider it equally heroic, was not marketable. And it was because of the heroism of the 442nd that America changed for us. It opened the eyes of the rest of America that, Americans come in this shape, that Americans can look like this, and that they owe a debt to Americans that look like us. It was not only heroic, it was powerful, forceful American statement.
That's when the slow cooker comes in. It's supposed to get you out of it.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight?
When it comes to the subject of the 442 and his experiences, he has really come out of his shell, and he talks about it without any hesitation. And before it was, he would give it a lot of thought before he would start talking about it. So I'm glad this has happened. I think that it's been good for him, And it's been good for all of us because we found out a lot about what happened during that time. It's a wonderful feeling to know that this kind of rounds out everything, you know, after 57 years of marriage, to find out that you still had things to learn about one another. And I think this really was a wonderful experience.
I just love my dad and for what he's done for this country and what he's done for this family. And so I'm just proud of my dad.
Always think about the United States as being the best place on the whole earth. It's the land of opportunity, and if they can't make it, it's just their fault because they didn't try. Yes, so I tell everybody, try. When I go give talk to the school, I tell them definitely go for broke, study hard, play hard, do everything hard, and you'll succeed. I even tell them they might be the next president of the United States.
Over the 10 years I've been working with him, I noticed their psychology, there's something different. There's a reason they're so great. Why are they accomplished so much and so famous? What is it? And so I started studying that and how the American veterans would tend to talk about the bad things in the war and how it affected them and how bad it was. The 442, on the other hand, would come in and talk about the good things in the war and the funny things they did and how they enjoyed each other and how they're still friends and how they're working for a better future. And I went, wow, that's it. They focus on the positive of the past to create a more positive future. The future's more important than the past, although the past is important. We look to the past to learn, but we focus on creating a better future for ourselves and our children. And that's what I essentially learned from them.
The casualty rate of the 100th 442nd was shockingly high. Some of those who survived are now living happy and peaceful lives, but some still carry deep emotional and physical scars due to the war. Regardless, they remembered those who died with dignity for this country, and they continue to live with honor.